A persistent phone call woke Natalie up at 8 a.m. It was an unknown number. She didn't want to answer the phone, but the phone kept ringing loudly. "Hello? I'm listening," Natalie said grudgingly into the phone. "Good morning. I'm calling about your ad. Are you selling a garage?" An elderly voice came through the phone. A garage? Did someone finally decide to buy that garage? Natalie placed the ad more than a month ago, but there had been no calls until now. The garage was located in a bad location on the very outskirts of the city. There were only a few residential buildings. "Yeah, I'm selling the garage," Natalie replied cheerfully. "And when can I come? I'd like to see it from the inside. I live nearby, across the street. I'll finally have a place to park my car so it's not parked outside. I already have the right amount of money. If I like the garage, I'll pay right away." Natalie hesitated. She had never been in a garage since her husband's death. To be honest, she'd forgotten about it. She only realized they had a garage when she signed the inheritance papers. The last time she entered it was about 13 years ago. Right, a year after her son was born. And then they moved to another neighborhood. In the new neighborhood, her husband was parking a car in the parking lot and was going to sell the garage. But they never sold the garage. About 7 years ago, Natalie thought about the garage. She wanted to take some old stuff from the apartment to the garage. Her husband Robert had yelled at her then, though he was a calm and peaceful man and hardly ever raised his voice. "No! I'm not going to let you store some junk from the apartment in my garage. I actually keep my work tools there and process photos. Don't clutter up the garage with your unnecessary stuff. Isn't a 3-bedroom apartment in a country house enough for you? The garage is my territory." Natalie was a little shocked at her husband's reaction. She knew Robert was into photography, but she thought he had long since given it up, as he hadn't brought any new photos lately. But she paid no attention to it and forgot the incident. A couple more years later, Natalie offered to rent out the garage. Her coworker was looking for a garage in that neighborhood. Robert became furious again. "Forget about that garage once and for all, okay? Don't even think about it. The garage doesn't exist for you." "Okay, fine, but why are you so nervous?" Robert didn't say anything and went to the bedroom, slamming the door loudly. Natalie didn't ask about the garage ever again. She didn't want to make her complicated relationship with her husband even worse. The woman knew Robert had never loved her. He was a tall, handsome, attractive man. He made good money as a chief engineer in a big construction company, and Natalie was an ordinary girl. Average height, average build, pretty face. But she wasn't a bright and attractive girl. She was just an average girl. However, she also made good money. Natalie worked as an economist for a well-known bank. Work was a real joy for her because she didn't have any personal life until she was 27. She and Robert met by chance. Natalie's grocery bag broke in the middle of the street. Robert came over, helped her pack everything up, and drove Natalie home. They started a relationship. Natalie realized that they couldn't have a future together, so she just enjoyed the short-term affair, as she thought at the time. She immediately fell madly in love with Robert, but she knew that such a handsome man was spending his time with her out of boredom, and soon the fairy tale would be over. And then Natalie got pregnant. No, she didn't want to get married that way, and she told Robert at once that he didn't owe her anything, but Robert insisted on marriage. Natalie was over the moon. Robert took care of his wife during the pregnancy, and when Alex was born, Robert turned into the best father. He loved his son very much. Robert never loved Natalie, but he treated her well and never hurt her. In general, their life was not bad. They purchased a spacious apartment, a second car, and a country house. Once or twice a year, they went on vacation abroad. Her husband was always a bit withdrawn and aloof. He worked a lot and often went on business trips. Sometimes it seemed to Natalie that they still lived together only because of their son, but she was happy anyway. And then tragedy happened. Robert died on a construction site. For almost a year, Natalie couldn't cope with the stress, and her son missed his father terribly. The person on the phone coughed, and that pulled Natalie back from her memories to real life. If it's convenient for you, come by at 3 o'clock today, Natalie suggested. It was Saturday, no need to go to work, so she'd go to the garage early. At least she had to see what was going on inside. For some reason, Natalie didn't want to go to the garage. Robert never let anyone into his garage. To him, it was some sort of private sanctuary. But she had no choice. Natalie called Frederick and asked him to go to the garage with her and maybe pick up some of Robert's tools. Frederick was her husband's cousin and her friend who always helped her out. When Robert was away on business, Frederick did the man's chores. He took Natalie everywhere she needed to go until she learned to drive. He often helped her with her son Alex when Robert was out of the city. The brothers were good friends, even though they were very different. Frederick was more open and cheerful. Natalie always wondered why he wasn't married yet, but Frederick only joked about it. At 2 o'clock, Frederick and Natalie approached the garage. Frederick opened the gate. "Okay, where's the light switch?" he muttered. A bright light bulb under the ceiling flashed on. "Oh my God! What is that?" Natalie cried out. All the walls of the garage were covered with photos, large and small, framed and unframed. All the photos showed a blonde beauty who looked like a foreign fashion model and a little girl. First, an infant, then an older child. The photographer was capturing each stage of the girls growing up. Frederick continued to press some switches. The overhead light turned off, and a special light began to illuminate, highlighting all the photos one by one. In one picture, a beautiful girl was twirling barefoot in the rain, her thin sundress following every curve of her body. In another picture, she is somewhere on the beach, her blonde curls scattered over her tan shoulders. Another photo shows her in a formal dress with a glass of champagne in her hand. And now, wearing the same dress, she is sitting at a table in a restaurant. With Robert, Natalie's husband. Another photo shocked Natalie. That blonde girl is standing outside the maternity hospital with a huge bouquet of flowers, while Robert is holding a baby in his arms, smiling. Here's the girl's birthday. She must be about 3 years old. Cake, balloons, guests, and Robert is here too, hugging the blonde girl and laughing happily. In the next photo, the girl is about 5 years old. She and Robert are playing in a pile of fall leaves. Frederick had already turned off the backlight and turned the overhead light back on, but Natalie still felt as if the pictures were flashing before her eyes in painful flashes. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hold back a scream or a moan. It hurt and offended the woman. The pain was unbearable. Her pain from her husband's death was now compounded by the bitter resentment of his betrayal. But still, she had loved him until the last day. She was always jealous but never showed it, so as to not offend Robert with her distrust. But Robert never really gave her any reason to be jealous, except that he had too many business trips, so there were no business trips. Robert traveled to see them all the time. Frederick tried to put his arm around Natalie's shoulders, but she dropped his arm. "You knew! You knew about this!" she shouted angrily. Tears were rolling down her face. "No, Natalie, I didn't know anything. I swear. I wouldn't hide such a thing from you. I swear to you, I had no idea. You know Robert was always withdrawn and never said anything." "Okay, I'm sorry. It's just that this whole thing is like a nightmare," Natalie said. In the far corner of the garage was something like an office with a desk, chairs, and cabinets. Natalie walked over to the cabinet and started opening the drawers. There were several different cameras and a folder with copies of documents. A copy of the birth certificate of the girl. Her name was Vanessa. The document stated that the girl's father was Robert and her mother was someone named Julia. Natalie felt the sharp pain again. So she really is his daughter. There was also a certificate of ownership for an apartment in another city. Vanessa was the owner of the apartment. In the car papers, Julia owned the car. Apparently, Robert bought the apartment and the car for them. Natalie sat down in the chair and covered her face with her hands. She still couldn't believe that her husband had a second family. It took her 2 weeks to come to her senses. Frederick comforted her as best as he could and tried to be there for her. But Natalie just wanted to be alone. She was calm only in the moments when her son saw her. She didn't want to upset the child, but inside her, everything was burning with pain. Every night, she sobbed into her pillow from the unbearable pain of betrayal. After a couple of weeks, when the pain had subsided, Natalie realized that, for some reason, she desperately wanted to see Vanessa, Robert's daughter. She had absolutely no desire to interact with her mother, but the girl, she looked just like Robert. Her husband must have had very strong genes because Alex also looked a lot like his father. Alex has a right to know that he has a sister. He might even want to communicate with her. And her mother-in-law, Robert's mom, she's so old. Her son's death has taken a toll. The news of a granddaughter would probably make her happy. These thoughts bothered Natalie very much. She couldn't stand it any longer, so she talked to Frederick. Together, they decided to go to the city where Robert's mistress lived with her daughter. The apartment papers contained an address, so that's where they went. A young guy opened the door. He said that he had rented this apartment a couple of months ago. As far as he knew, the apartment's owner's name was Julia, but she had moved abroad. She only left her phone number and the number of the bank account where she had to transfer the money for the rent. Natalie walked out of the building upset, so she'd never see Vanessa. If Julia had rented out the apartment, then they were gone for good. Seeing how upset Natalie was, Frederick said, "Well, let's call her. We'll ask her about her daughter. She's in another country, not on another planet. After all, the girl should know she has a brother and a grandmother." "Yes, Frederick, go ahead. Please call her. I'd call, but I just don't have the strength anymore." Julia immediately answered the call. "Hello?" An irritated voice came through the phone. "Julia, good afternoon. This is Frederick, Robert's brother." "Oh, Robert's relatives have shown up," Julia said sarcastically. "You're just in time. It's been almost a year." "But we didn't know anything about you." Frederick was confused. "I see. That coward didn't even dare to tell anyone about our daughter. What do you want now?" "We just wanted to see your daughter, Vanessa. We'd like to meet her and tell her she has a grandmother and a brother, and me." "But what do you want from me?" "Go and meet her. I left Vanessa in our city, and now she's in a local orphanage. You can do whatever you want." "What? In an orphanage? But why?" "I gave up on her. Yeah, I'm a bad mom. I didn't want to have her at all. I was only 20 when I got pregnant. It was Robert who insisted. 'Don't be afraid, keep the baby. I'll provide for you. You won't need anything,' he said. And now what? He died and left me with nothing. A car and some presents. How am I supposed to raise a child? Vanessa's doing well. Her daddy gave her an apartment. When she gets out of the orphanage, she'll have a good place to live. But I had to find ways to get my life back on track." Frederick and Natalie, who heard every word, were shocked. This girl was talking about her daughter as if she were a stranger. "Well, anyway," Julia continued, "I was going to fight with Robert's wife over the inheritance because Vanessa is his daughter. But recently I was lucky, and Robert's wife too, by the way," Julia laughed. "A rich foreigner invited me to live with him and proposed. Robert never proposed marriage to me. He said he would not divorce his wife until his son was 18, even though he said he loved me very much. So I packed up and went abroad to see my fiancée. I didn't care about the inheritance anymore. My future husband is rich and can give me much more than a pathetic inheritance. But he doesn't know about Vanessa, and he'll never know about her. I can't risk it. I've got a chance to have a normal life, and I can't lose it. So that's it. Now you know everything, and you can do whatever you want with Vanessa. Okay, I don't have time to talk to you. Goodbye." And Julia hung up. Natalie and Frederick were shocked. How could Robert, an intelligent, well-mannered, kind man, fall in love with this girl? "Natalie, I will adopt Vanessa. My brother's daughter will not grow up in an orphanage. Robert wouldn't forgive me for that." "Of course, Frederick. You're right. Let's go and meet the girl. The poor child." Natalie and Frederick explained to the director of the orphanage who they were, and soon a caretaker walked into the office with a sweet, shy girl who looked like an angel. "Honey, we're your daddy's friends." Natalie walked over to the girl and gave her a big, beautiful doll. Vanessa stood with her head down and her arms folded behind her back. Natalie stroked the girl's blonde curls. Darling, don't be shy, and don't be afraid of us. Frederick smiled and said in a soft voice. Tears came to his eyes. Suddenly, the girl looked up at them with huge gray eyes, just like Robert's. When is Daddy coming? The girl asked. I don't know yet, baby, Natalie answered. But we'll visit you on weekends, can we? And then they'll let you come visit us, too. Would you like that? Yes. The girl answered quietly, and suddenly she put her arms around Natalie's neck and pressed herself tightly against her. Poor kid. She didn't even ask about her mom. Natalie was indignant as they walked out of the orphanage. I'm afraid to imagine the nightmare the girl lived in. It's like she had no mom. Probably Robert was the only one taking care of her. After all, he was a perfect father. Look, Natalie, they won't give me the girl because I'm single. Even though I have a good income and we are relatives, social services will not let me adopt a child while I'm single. So what should we do? I offer you a sham marriage. Will you help me? I have no one else to ask about such a favor. Yes, of course I'll help you. You don't even have to ask. I will help you with everything about Vanessa, and I will help you take care of her. You know, I was angry at first, but it's not the baby's fault. I saw that little angel today and my heart ached. She looks just like Alex. By the way, I wonder how Alex will take the news. I hope he takes it well. He's a kind and clever boy, and he loved his father very much. Soon, Frederick and Natalie applied to register their marriage. The day before the marriage, Frederick came to Natalie's house with a bottle of champagne and a huge bouquet of scarlet roses. It was late in the evening. Alex was at his grandmother's that night, and Natalie was reading a book in her pajamas. Frederick, are you okay? Did something happen? Natalie noticed that Frederick was a little drunk. Natalie, bring the glasses. Let's celebrate our wedding. But we haven't had a wedding yet, Natalie laughed. Well, then let's celebrate the engagement. Here, take it. It's for you. Frederick took a red velvet box out of his pocket. Natalie opened it and saw a beautiful ring with many small diamonds. Frederick, what is this? What for? I just wanted to propose to you, in the proper way. Well, you know, it's unnecessary for a sham marriage. Natalie, maybe I don't want our marriage to be a sham. Don't you understand anything? Haven't you noticed anything in all these years? Frederick, what are you talking about? I love you. I loved you at first sight, but I knew I didn't have any chance. You're beautiful, he's handsome, but I'm just an ordinary guy, a fun-loving guy. Not like Robert, but he's a fool. How could he cheat on a woman like you? Frederick, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't expect. I didn't know. Natalie was confused, but she was insanely pleased that Frederick thought she was beautiful. She couldn't even believe it. Okay, Natalie, I think I better go. I thought you knew about my feelings and maybe I had a chance. But I understand. A woman like you would never be interested in a guy like me. But it's okay. I won't bother you, and I'm sorry. Frederick walked out, lowering his eyes. Natalie didn't even have time to say anything. Natalie and Frederick got married, and a few weeks later, they picked Vanessa up from the orphanage. Her brother Alex and her grandmother were already waiting for her. Now the girl would have a loving family. A year later, Frederick, Natalie, Alex, and Vanessa were moving into a spacious house in the suburbs. Robert dreamed of his children living in a large house outside of the city, enjoying the fresh air and beautiful nature, and his dreams came true. And Frederick and Natalie were opening a new page in their lives because their sham marriage already became real.